we're going to walk through the absolute essential steps to take your database from a simple shared file to a rock-solid, scalable system. All right, let's just dive right into this SQL Server Blueprint. Quick roadmap for today. We'll hit 1. The shared file problem. 2. Free SQL Express backend. 3. Splitting your database. 4. Naming and business logic. 5. Absolute design no-nos. And finally, 6. The phased migration process. Starting with Section 1, the shared file problem, the limits of a shared access backend. Now, to really understand this, we've got to look at what happens when your standard access database hits its ceiling with multiple users. There's a brilliant quote from our sources that hits the nail on the head. It says, "A shared access backend is basically a restaurant with a big open salad bar. Anyone can walk up and take whatever they want, right? No one's checking plates. If someone can open the file on a network drive, they can basically see all your tables, copy sensitive stuff, or, accidentally wipe out records. It's a huge security risk when you've got real business data on the line." And honestly, beyond just the security piece, the technical failures start stacking up super fast as you grow. You get these incredibly bloated files that take literally forever to back up. Then you run into concurrent user crashes. That dreaded file in use death spiral when two people try to edit the exact same thing. Oh, and over a VPN? Forget about it. It's a total nightmare. The Jet database engine just wasn't built for wide area networks, which means a tiny little internet blip can actually corrupt your entire unsplit file. But don't panic. Fixing this doesn't mean you have to throw away your beloved front end or hire some expensive enterprise IT department. Which brings us to Section 2, Free SQL Express Backend, introducing your new foundation. Let's look at the old way versus the new way. On one side, you have the monolithic access database. The UI and the data are all mixed together in one big file. That means high corruption risks and serious locking limits. But then look at the hybrid architecture. This is where it gets good. You actually keep your access front end, so the forms, the reports, the buttons your team already knows and loves. But your data, that lives in a SQL Server backend that handles the row-level locking and gives you incredible stability. Basically, SQL Server does all the heavy lifting underneath the hood. And here is the absolute best part for small and medium businesses. 10. That's 10 gigabytes. Microsoft actually offers a totally free edition called SQL Server Express, and it can perfectly handle databases up to 10 gigs right on your local network. It handles multiple users, indexing, enterprise-grade security, all without a monthly cloud bill or those crazy expensive licensing fees. Okay, so how do we actually get there? That's Section 3, splitting your database, the crucial first step. To make this highly efficient hybrid architecture work, you absolutely have to split the database into a front end and a back end, or FE/BE. All this really means is that your tables and relationships move to the server, that's your back end, and everything else, like your queries, your forms, your VBA code, well, that stays right where it is in the front end file on the user's local computer. You literally just point your existing front end to the new SQL Server tables using linked tables. Your team won't even know the difference. They just keep working in the exact same interface. Moving right along to Section 4, naming and business logic, building a clean foundation. You need to build with migration in mind from day one, and that starts with really strict naming conventions. If you take away nothing else today, please remember this. Absolutely no spaces in your table or field names. Just don't do it. No special characters either. You also want to avoid reserved words, things like date or description or year. And our sources highlight a super smart tip. Make sure you assign your own unique index names manually in Access, because if you don't, when you eventually upsize to SQL Server, it's going to generate these incredibly ugly, confusing GUID-type names for your indexes. Sticking to these rules now is literally going to save you hours or maybe even days of headaches down the road. Now, another huge part of that clean foundation is your business logic. And for that, we look to stored procedures. So instead of building these massive, complex macros in your Access front end that drag thousands of records across your network just to process them locally, you create stored procedures directly on the SQL Server. You're basically bringing the work to the data
instead of dragging all that heavy data across the network to the work.
And the payoff for doing this is just staggering. By shifting those heavy queries and multi-action tasks to the backend, using things like indexed SQL and pass-through patterns, your heavy reporting cycles can be up to 70% faster. Seriously, month-end financial reports that used to completely choke your network can suddenly run in seconds, all because the server processes the data and only sends the final finished results back to your screen. It's a total game changer.
Okay, I need to throw up a massive warning sign right now. Section 5, absolute design no-nos, mistakes that absolutely ruin migrations.
If you really want to future-proof, there are a few structural flaws you must avoid at all costs. Number 1, never ever store multiple values in a single field. Look, Access has a multi-value field feature, sure, but SQL Server absolutely does not support it natively because it breaks standard relational database rules. Also, you've got to avoid table-level lookups and avoid storing calculated fields directly in your tables. You want to keep your schema highly normalized, which basically just means you aren't needlessly duplicating data. If you rely on those messy, access-specific quirks today, moving to SQL Server later is going to require a really painful, complete rewrite of your schema.
So, we've got our clean foundation. Let's talk about actually making the move. Section 6, phased migration process, moving step by step. Look, migrating your database is a controlled, logical journey. It is not a blind weekend leap where you cross your fingers and hope for the best. First, you do a discovery audit to find your slowest queries and dependencies. Second, you split the database if you haven't done that already. Third is your schema and data migration. That's moving the tables and double-checking row counts so you don't lose a single penny of data. Fourth, UAT, user acceptance testing and load testing. You got to make sure it actually handles multiple concurrent users smoothly. And finally, a phased cutover, taking it step by step, validating every single turn. And that brings us to the end of our explainer. I want to leave you with a final thought today. Your Access front end is ready, but are you building a back end just to survive today? Or are you designing a true foundation for tomorrow? By splitting your database, enforcing strict naming, avoiding those multi-value fields, and leveraging SQL Server Express, you are setting your system up to scale effortlessly. Thanks so much for hanging out and exploring this blueprint with me, and I highly, highly encourage you to start applying these architectural principles to your database right now. See you next time.